Hi everybody, today we are going to explore how to draw and paint some cats. And for that we will need paper, pencil, eraser, sharpener, paint, brushes, something to mix the paint, water, cloth. Before we dive into painting, let's cover the basics of drawing a cat. I recommend using grids to help you organize your drawing. Grids make it easier to break down the shapes and fit them into the space you're working with. When you draw using a grid, you can easily figure out where to place the facial features. It's all about breaking it down into manageable parts. The more you practice, the easier it will get. Once you are confident, you can simplify your grid and experiment with more complex shapes and compositions. The same approach applies when you're sketching the cat's body. However, I always recommend focusing on the face. The body doesn't need to be overly detailed as long as the face is well done. Remember, you don't need to replicate reality. Think of reality as a reference, not a strict rule. Don't box yourself into imitating every detail. This is your safe space to transform the image however you like. This is where you can express yourself. And this is how you will find your own style. When we paint, we start just like we did with the dogs, by establishing basic shapes, blocking in a single color, and gradually adding shadows and highlights. The same principles apply regardless of how simple or complex your composition is. If you're wondering how to transfer more complex shapes into your canvas, please check out the video on using grids for transferring drawings. The link is on the description. I start by staining the background with the soft color, and I have already transferred all the sketches. Don't worry too much about body details, but since we are working on portraits, I always put extra emphasis on the eyes. When painting, all texture comes from the brush strokes. Basically, this is just a simple block of color with added shadows and highlights. Let's move on to our second cat. Once again, I am using a photograph for reference. I like to modify certain features for a more interesting composition. After marking the basic shapes, I fill it in with a mix of browns and blues, but feel free to experiment with other colors. Just keep your focus on the face and especially the eyes. They will be the focal point. Now let's paint a white cat, but using a black cat as our reference. The process is the same as before. Mark the edges, emphasize the face, especially the eyes, and simplify the body. Again, if you want to add highlights and shadows, feel free to do so. I use a dark blue here to create depth. Since it's a white cat, I add a bit more detail to the face features, but even without that, the painting would still work just fine. For this one, I am using a black cat as a reference again. Yes, the body shapes are different, but remember, we are not trying to recreate reality. Reality is just there to guide you. Once you master color, you won't need to rely on black and white to define shadows and highlights. It is not about perfection, it is about expression. Next, we will be painting another black cat, but using this gray cat as model. I know the body types are different, but remember, we are using the photographs as references, not as strict templates. Don't feel confined by realism. Realism can limit your imagination. You don't need to replicate the model perfectly, just use it to inspire you. And this is the path to finding your own style. At this stage, I'll add some more whiskers with a white pencil, but you could easily do that with a regular pencil. Lastly, a Siamese cat. I'm using a mix of blues and browns for the coat, and the process is just the same. We mark the edges, fill in with solid color, and then we add any details to the face and the eyes. To balance the composition, I have also adjusted the background color to harmonize with the cat. All the colors here are related to one another, which gives unity to the composition. You can add optional highlights like yellow for a little extra touch, but it's totally optional. And these are the results of today's exercise. I hope these have inspired you to experiment with your own cat paintings. And the key takeaway is that this is your time to explore and express yourself. Don't worry about perfection. As always, keep on practicing and thank you for joining us.